Hi, I'm Akina. At Christmas, my parents gave my seat to a stranger. Not metaphorically, my name was literally replaced at the table. They put me near the door, like I was just dropping by. That night, I watched them toast the people who stole from me. I watched them give my gift to someone else. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been rewriting the story for years, quietly cutting me out of everything, my savings, the will, even the family photo wall. And when I finally stepped back, they didn't apologize. They deleted me. But what happens when the one you erase has the receipts and finally decides to use them? It was Christmas Eve in Savannah, and the wind didn't care about holiday spirit. It slipped beneath my coat collar like a thief, sharp and deliberate, even though I'd layered up. Zadie, my daughter, held my hand tight. Her other arm clutched a tinfoil-covered casserole dish, mac and cheese, extra breadcrumbs, because I remembered who liked it that way. We stood outside my parents' house for longer than we should have. No porch light, no welcome sign, no bark from the neighbor's dog like when I used to live here. Just the sound of our shoes scuffing the steps and the slight tremble in Zadie's breath as she said, "Maybe they're busy." I rang the bell, waited. Nothing. After a full minute, I reached for the back door, the one I used to sneak out of as a teenager and sneak back through when Dad went to bed early. It wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. The smell hit me first. Rosemary, cinnamon ham, something baking that hadn't come from a store. I paused in the threshold for a second. It should have felt like coming home. But standing there, balancing hot food and a child, something inside me hesitated. The kind of hesitation that didn't come from nerves, but recognition. Like my body already knew something my head didn't want to admit. No one looked up. My mother, Clarabelle, was at the counter, folding cloth napkins into hard little triangles. Maris, my older sister, was laughing too loud at something her best friend said. Dad stood by the living room window, swirling bourbon in his hand, like he'd just walked off a Southern novel cover. No one asked why I'd come in through the back. No one asked how I was. I set the dish down quietly and brushed snow from Zadie's shoulders. "Hi," I said, voice too soft. "We brought dessert." Clarabelle didn't stop folding napkins. Maris turned her head slightly, then went right back to whatever she was whispering. I waited another beat before stepping closer. "We brought mac and cheese and that cranberry pie you like." "Oh," Clarabelle finally said, not turning. "We thought you might not come this year." My stomach folded the same way those napkins did. I confirmed with Maris 2 weeks ago. Maris looked up now. "Right. It's just been so crazy lately. You know how the holidays are." I didn't respond. I helped Zadie out of her coat and looked toward the dining room. That's when I saw it. 12 seats, all dressed with silver-rimmed plates, linen napkins, and handwritten name cards, Maris's handwriting, loopy and deliberate, like always. I scanned for mine. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I'd find it on the far end, near the kids' section, if they even had one. Nothing. Instead, right next to the entryway where Boots dripped water onto the mat, I saw it. A small wooden stool, the kind you use when you need to reach the top cabinet. On it sat my name, folded into a tent card, right beneath the thermostat, next to the coat rack, where guests dropped scarves and dogs shook off snow. "Mommy," Zadie whispered, tugging my sleeve. "Why aren't we sitting at the big table?" I glanced toward the long mahogany piece that I used to polish every Thanksgiving. Maris's friend, the one who divorced last year, was sitting in the spot I used to fill, right beside Dad. Her cardigan was draped over the back like she owned it. Clarabelle must have noticed us staring. "We figured it'd be easier for you and Zadie, near the door in case she gets fussy. The seat's right there." She didn't say it unkindly. That almost made it worse. Zadie looked up at me, confused but quiet. Her fingers were still clutching the edge of her sleeve. I could see the worry behind her big brown eyes, the same look she gave me when I picked her up late from aftercare, and she thought maybe I forgot. I knelt down, brushing her hair behind her ear. It's okay, baby. Let's just get settled. I said it like I believed it. I didn't. We sat on the stool, the draft from the door wrapped around us like we didn't belong. I helped her unwrap the tinfoil from the casserole, still warm, untouched. The room buzzed with voices and laughter, familiar, but not meant for me. The fireplace crackled from across the room, but the heat never made it to where we sat. Zadie nibbled on a roll someone handed her. I sat still, watching the others laugh, pass dishes, take photos with people they'd only known since Easter brunch. No one asked how my job was going. No one asked how the move went after I'd been forced to downsize post-divorce. And I didn't expect much, but I had expected something. Even silence used to feel like shared history. This felt like removal. I used to set that table, every year. Used to help Maris pick out centerpieces. Used to drop extra cash into Clarabelle's account when she said the light bill had gotten a little tight after Dad's surgery. Used to carry things, quietly, without receipts. I counted. 1 casserole, 1 child, and 0 acknowledgement. Zadie leaned into my shoulder, resting her head there. "Are we gonna stay long?" she whispered. I looked around the room again, the family I used to fight to hold together, too busy laughing with everyone but me. "Not too long," I said. I didn't squeeze her hand, not yet. We lingered at that tiny stool near the door until Zadie's legs began to swing slowly beneath her, a quiet signal that she was done sitting but didn't know where else to be. The sound in the house stayed the same, silverware clinking, glasses refilled, voices rising and dipping without us. Nothing was wrong on the surface, but everything had shifted under it. I helped carry the dessert tray into the kitchen, not because anyone asked, but because habits die hard. Maris was leaned up against the counter, telling her friend about a rental property she and Lazaro were eyeing in Destin. 2 blocks from the beach, she said, laughing. "We'll Airbnb the crap out of it when we're not using it." Her friend nodded, like they were in on a secret the rest of us didn't qualify for. Clarabelle poured white wine into stemless glasses, 3 in a row, not one extended in my direction. She didn't even glance up when I set down the casserole dish, now lukewarm and untouched. Someone mumbled, "Akina's here, right?" But it was more confirmation than welcome. I smiled. Not out of politeness, just to prove to myself that my face still moved that way. Zadie stood by the hallway archway, clutching her sketch pad. I motioned for her to come sit near me on the couch. Instead, she found her way to the rug where the other kids had piled up. Nieces, nephews, Maris's goddaughter, all in a circle around a tablet playing a holiday cartoon. I should have known better than to think it would go unnoticed when she wasn't called by name. Clarabelle passed out hot chocolate in matching red mugs. She handed one to every child. When she reached Zadie, she paused, mug in hand. "Did Zadie even send a list this year?" she asked with a furrowed brow, turning slightly toward Maris. "She did," I said quickly. "I emailed it to you Thanksgiving weekend." "Oh," she said, blinking. "Maybe it got lost in the shuffle. You know how these things go." Zadie looked up from the rug, trying not to show she was listening, but her hand stilled over her coloring. She sat upright, her small back suddenly tense. I knelt down beside her. "They might have just missed it," I said softly. She whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" The pit in my stomach grew teeth. Before I could say anything, the call for the family photo rang out like a fire drill. Everyone shuffled toward the fireplace, where Clarabelle had staged poinsettias and garlands for her annual card-worthy snapshot. I helped clear the mess of toys and crumbs, wiping juice off the floor after one of the toddlers tipped their cup. By the time I turned around, everyone was already lined up, Dad in the middle, Maris on one side, Clarabelle on the other. The rest clustered naturally into place, as if rehearsed. "Smile!" Maris's friend called from behind the phone. I was still off to the side, halfway between helping and waiting for instruction. No one called for me, so I stood there, just out of frame. "Don't worry, we'll take another one later," someone said absently. But they didn't. A few minutes later, I saw the picture posted on Maurice's social media. The caption read, "Bickford family, whole again." Zadie was not in it. Neither was I. Dinner began not long after. The roast came out, the rolls were passed, and laughter filled every inch of space except the corner where Zadie and I sat with our plates in our laps. I didn't realize what was missing until the gifts were brought out. The kids formed a loose semicircle around the tree. Laughter rose as the name tags were read aloud, and colorful bags changed hands. Zadie kept glancing at me, smiling each time another kid got a gift. Her name wasn't called. I watched Clarabelle reach for another package, glance at the tag, then at Zadie, and pause. "I think we might have missed one," she said, almost convincing herself. "She didn't write a letter this year, did she?" "She did," I said. "I saw her write it myself. It had stickers." Clarabelle smiled tightly. "Well, maybe it didn't make it into the pile. We'll find something later." Zadie stayed quiet, her fingers picking at the hem of her sweater. "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said later, wrapping my arm around her. "It wasn't you. It was never you." She nodded against my side, but didn't say anything. As the evening faded, I tucked her into a borrowed blanket on the pull-out couch. The light from the Christmas tree flickered across her face, painting soft gold against the shadows. I watched her chest rise and fall, the steady rhythm of a child trying not to cry while drifting to sleep. In the corner, Maris laughed at something Lazaro said. Clarabelle looked over at them the way people do when they've already chosen a side and decided not to budge. I sat down next to my daughter, pulled out my phone, and opened the Notes app. Typed, "No more defending what erases me." I didn't write it with anger. I wrote it with finality. After I set my phone down, I sat there for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't just hang in the room, it hums under your skin. Clarabelle and Maris were still talking near the fireplace, their voices low but bright, as if joy was something they could perform on cue. I stood, slowly, careful not to wake Zadie, and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water I didn't really want. The faucet hissed like it was irritated to be needed. As I drank, I let my eyes drift across the space. The polished counters, the worn holiday towel from years ago still hanging near the oven handle, the fake poinsettia arrangement Maris had bought last season because it photographed better. Everything was familiar, but none of it felt mine anymore. It hit me then, all at once. How much I had done for these people. How little of it had names on it. My name, to be exact. I remembered standing outside the grocery store 3 Decembers ago, holding a plastic bag of medication for Dad, arguing with the insurance rep over the phone because Clarabelle said she didn't understand the paperwork. I had paid the invoice on the spot, from the only bonus I'd gotten that quarter. Not a thank you, just a follow-up call a week later, asking if I'd checked on the electric bill too. Back then, it didn't even sting. I chalked it up to family. You give, you help. You don't keep track. Until they do. Of what wasn't yours to begin with. Sometime after dinner, when the wine started flowing heavier, and the noise swelled into that soft chaos only families can create, Clarabelle clinked a spoon against her glass. "Let's raise a glass," she said, standing with her usual calm authority. "To Maris and Lazaro, for everything they've carried this year, especially with your dad's health scare." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. He gave her a quiet smile, dazed but content. "They've been our rock, really. I don't know where we'd be without them." Maris grinned, lifted her glass with a performative flair. Lazaro gave a smug nod, not even pretending to be humble. "And me?" I sat in the corner by the end table, half in shadow, fully in disbelief. The home nurse, billed to my card, the portable oxygen, arranged through my job's concierge service, the groceries when Clarabelle said they were stretching, mine delivered, no questions asked. I stared at my half-empty wine glass. The edge of it trembled just slightly, but I kept my hand steady. Not a word, not a look in my direction. It wasn't just omission, it was a rewrite. "Cheers," Clarabelle said, and glasses clinked around the room. No one noticed I didn't raise mine. Later that night, as the wrapping paper storm began and the big gifts were passed out, Maris handed Clarabelle a long box wrapped in silver foil. Clarabelle passed it to Dad with a proud smile. "This one's from Maris and Laz," she announced, already reaching for her phone to record the moment. I knew that box. 6 weeks ago, I'd ordered a shearling coat online. Dad had hinted about one in October, after seeing a similar one in a catalog. I'd saved for it, tracked shipping twice, and wrapped it myself with a handwritten card that read, "To the man who taught me loyalty before words. Merry Christmas. Akina." Dad tore into the paper like a kid. "Now this," he said, holding it up. "This is sharp. You two really know me." Zadie, who had watched me wrap that very box in our apartment, looked over at me, confused. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she might say something. I shook my head once, just enough. "Not now, baby." I didn't ask where the card went. I didn't accuse. But I knew, and so did Maris. She didn't meet my eyes. Sometime after that, Clarabelle stood up again, a folded piece of stationery in her hand. "I wrote something," she said, voice soft, almost maternal. "Just a little something to say thank you to the people who made this year bearable." The room went quiet, not out of anticipation, more like habit. When Clarabelle spoke, people listened. She had that way about her. She cleared her throat and began. "To the children who showed up, not just in presence but in effort, who made meals, arranged rides, covered gaps without asking, who reminded me that family is not just blood, but commitment." She looked around the room, smiling at each name she read. To Maris, for never letting me face paperwork alone. To Lazaro, for bringing humor and lightness during the hardest days. To Greg, for always calling, even when he couldn't visit. That was it. She folded the paper with care, tucked it into her purse like it belonged to history. No mention of me. Not even Zadie. I stayed seated. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. Zadie didn't ask this time. Clarabelle poured herself another glass of wine. Maris slipped into the kitchen with Lazaro, laughing again. Too loud, like always. I opened the Notes app on my phone again, typed, 3 mentions, none of them mine. Then another line. This is what erasure looks like. Not loud, just done. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket and leaned into the quiet. The clatter of dessert forks and after-dinner chatter had settled into that hazy lull where half the room reaches for coffee and the other half starts checking the clock. Zadie was asleep again, curled in the corner of the couch under the blanket I'd pulled over her earlier. Her small body rising and falling steadily was the only rhythm I trusted in that house. The first wave of guests, Maris's goddaughter and her parents, started bundling up by the door. Scarves, boots, plastic containers full of leftover pie. The goodbyes were loud and long, full of fake promises to do brunch next week and not let months pass again. I knew none of those things would happen. Maris and her best friend laughed as they rinsed wine glasses. Clarabelle stood by the counter, swirling what was left in her bottle and humming along to a version of Silent Night, playing softly on the Bluetooth speaker. She walked over, calm as ever. "You're staying the night, right?" she asked, more of a statement than a question. "Can you help rinse up before you turn in?" It wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. It was automatic. The way someone might ask a waitress for more butter. I nodded. But something inside felt different, stiffer, like something had snapped into place and wasn't bending back. I stepped into the kitchen and started clearing plates. No one thanked me. No one noticed. Clarabelle was now on the phone with one of her church friends, speaker on full blast. Her voice had the bright lilt she reserved for public image maintenance. "Yes, Maris has just been incredible," she said. "Honestly, she carried this whole season. I don't know how I'd manage without her. She's really the one who shows up, you know?" I stacked the dishes quietly, one on top of the other. Lazaro walked by, drying his hands on a dish towel. He gave me a little smirk and said, "Still the family elf, huh?" I kept loading the dishwasher. Didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't answer. A few minutes later, As I scrubbed the last of the pie crust off a chipped baking pan, my finger caught the edge. Not deep, but sharp enough to sting. The kind of cut that doesn't bleed right away, just burns as a reminder that, yes, something got under your skin. I pressed a paper towel around it and didn't look up when Maris entered the kitchen behind me. "You're amazing, you know that?" she said, pouring herself a splash of wine. "Most people would have left after tonight, but you just power through." I didn't answer. "You've always been the quiet one," she added, almost like it was a compliment. By the time Clarabelle called everyone back to the living room for one last toast, the air had that slow drag of a night stretching past welcome. The guests were gone. Just us now, core family and residual tension. Clarabelle held her wine glass at chest height and gave a warm smile like she was about to accept an award. "This year," she began, "was not easy. But if there's one person who got us through it, truly held this family together, it was Maris." I sat near the archway, drying my hands with a towel I didn't remember bringing in. "She always knows what to say, what to do, and where to be," Clarabelle continued. "She's intuitive, dependable, and selfless." People clapped. Even Greg, who showed up late and said 3 words all night, nodded in agreement. No one looked at me. I pulled out my phone, tapped open notes, and wrote, "They can't see you when they've already decided who the hero is." Later, when the others had disappeared to their respective corners of the house, I took Zadie upstairs. No one told us where to sleep, so I found the guest room with the twin bed and a nightstand missing a drawer. I laid her down gently, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and crawled in beside her. The applause still echoed in my head, not because it was loud, but because it was final. Zadie stirred a little and whispered, "I like the tree lights, Mommy." "Me too," I whispered back. "Just not the house they're in." And I knew by morning I'd no longer keep their secrets for them. I woke before the house stirred, the kind of early that didn't belong to alarms or roosters, just the kind born from decision. The room was dim, the light outside still a deep gray. Beside me, Zadie lay tucked in, cheeks flushed from sleep, her little fist curled close to her chest. I didn't move fast. I didn't have to. I just knew that by the time the coffee brewed downstairs, I'd already be gone, emotionally, if not yet physically. I got dressed in silence, layered up as quietly as I could. The hallway was empty, not a creak on the stairs. I slipped into the kitchen, grabbed my tote from the corner where I left it, and unzipped it. Inside, beneath a scarf and an old receipt for allergy meds, was the manila folder. It had lived in that bag for over a year. Patient, unopened, but not forgotten. I placed it on the kitchen counter like it was nothing more than a grocery list. Maris entered from the hallway in full makeup, too awake for the hour. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "Still playing Santa?" I smiled, but not at her. "Just tying up loose ends." Breakfast started 20 minutes later. Clarabelle stood at the stove scrambling eggs. Maris set the table. Dad sat in his usual seat with the newspaper folded neatly beside him, even though he hadn't read the fine print in years. I waited until the plates were filled, the napkins unfolded, and the silence was comfortably boring. "This will be the last holiday I contribute anything," I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. Clarabelle looked up from her eggs, blinked. "Sorry?" "No more tuition," I continued, glancing at her. "No more bills? No more cushion?" Lazaro chuckled. "Didn't realize you were still pitching in?" Maris let out a soft snort. "What, like the $20 for the tree last year?" I didn't respond with a quip. I reached into my tote and pulled out a sheet of paper, actually 5 sheets, stapled together, color-coded, time-stamped. I slid it across the table toward Clarabelle. She hesitated, then took it. Her eyes moved left to right, line by line. Deposits, pharmacy charges, school fees, insurance overages, grocery reimbursements she never returned. It took 2 minutes to read. She used none of them to say a word. I leaned back slightly. Just so it's clear, I said, who actually showed up? Nobody argued. That told me more than if they had. After breakfast, I stood, walked over to the hallway bench, and pulled out my phone. I opened the videos folder and found the one I'd saved last December. Clarabelle had been sitting in Dad's hospital room then, her eyes puffy, her voice trembling. I'd filmed her on mute at first. She didn't know. But then she turned to me and said the words that lived rent-free in my memory ever since. "Without Akina, we'd have lost everything," she said. "She saved our home, saved me." I pressed play now, volume up. The room quieted again. You could hear the heater click on in the background, the clink of a spoon against ceramic. Clarabelle's voice from the video filled the space. "She's the only one who figured out the insurance, the only one who stayed after visiting hours." I let the video end naturally. I didn't add commentary, didn't look for applause. When it ended, I clicked the screen off, slipped the phone back into my coat, and went to zip it, slow, deliberate. Maris cleared her throat. "That was private." "No," I said. "It was unspoken. There's a difference." Clarabelle didn't say anything, just reached for her cup again. Her hand trembled a little. Zadie came down from the stairs not long after, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her bunny socks sliding on the floor. "Morning, baby," I said, crouching to meet her. "We're heading out soon." "Already? We've done what we needed to do." As we moved toward the door, she asked to use the bathroom. I nodded and waited in the hallway. That's when I saw the photo wall. Birthday parties, vacations, cookouts, Maris and Lazaro in different outfits, year after year. Clarabelle in front of the hydrangeas, Dad asleep on the recliner, Zadie as a toddler in someone else's arms. Frame after frame of a family I supposedly belonged to, and not one with me in it. Not a single photo. I stepped back, just one pace, enough to see the wall from a distance. Zadie came out and grabbed my hand. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." I didn't slam the door when I left, but they heard it close anyway. By the time we pulled the car out of the driveway, the frost on the windshield had started to melt. I didn't blast the heat. I let the silence sit between us, same way it had all morning inside that house. Zadie held a candy cane she hadn't eaten, rolling it slowly in her palm like she was waiting for a reason to keep it. We didn't drive far, just to the gas station, where I topped off the tank and let her run inside to use the bathroom. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring ahead at nothing. Clarabelle hadn't called. Maris hadn't texted. They didn't need to. I'd made my position clear. I was out. Or so I thought. When we returned later that afternoon, because Zadie had forgotten her sketchbook and begged to retrieve it before heading back home, the energy had shifted. The kitchen smelled like reheated ham, the kind that lingers just enough to remind you that joy was had and you weren't invited to it. Clarabelle caught me near the door, half smile in place. "About what you said yesterday," she began, voice sweet but measured. "Are you sure you're not, maybe reacting a little strongly?" "I'm not reacting," I told her, steady as the tile beneath me. "I'm realigning." From the hallway, Lazaro called out, "Don't stress it, Akina. We'll all laugh about this in a week." It wasn't funny. I headed to the den where Zadie's things were. That's when I passed Clarabelle's home office. The door was cracked, the desk lamp still on, papers neatly stacked in that compulsive way she always arranged everything. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The top sheet of the file was labeled Revised Estate Plan, bolded, dated last month. I flipped it open just enough to scan the beneficiaries. Maris, Lazaro. Then a line for the lake house, our family's property upstate, a place I was once told would be mine. My name? Absent. Clarabelle entered behind me without a word. I didn't flinch, didn't turn. "You're not even in the same state anymore," she said, as if that explained theft. "This just made more sense." "I'm in this family," I replied. "Or at least I was." She didn't apologize. She didn't offer anything, just moved past me, hand on the folder, ready to tuck it away like all things she preferred hidden. We left not long after. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't look back at the dining room, or the ornaments, or the wrapping paper still strewn across the floor like evidence of joy. That night, when we returned, because plans had changed, because Clarabelle insisted Zadie stay for tradition's sake, I found a handwritten note taped to the door of the room we were meant to sleep in. Laundry room, temporary guest space. There wasn't a bed, just a thin mattress folded over the dryer. A sheet, no pillows, no lamp, no window. Zadie stood in the doorway, holding her stuffed bear like a question. "Is this our fault?" she asked. "No, baby," I said, kneeling down beside her. "This is what people do when they want to punish someone without looking like they are." I laid her down gently, placed the blanket over her, and then sat beside the washer. The rumble of the pipes in the wall was louder than usual, like the house was tired of itself. I pulled the manila folder from my tote bag and spread it across my lap. Medical receipts, bank transfers, printed emails with Clarabelle's subject lines. "Just a little short this month." And, "Any chance you could cover this too?" I wasn't looking for proof. I already had it. I was looking for the nerve to do something about it. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table while everyone else fluttered around, pretending nothing happened. Dad flipped pages of the newspaper he couldn't read. Maris gushed about some new brand deal she was working on. Lazaro made jokes about holiday calories. Clarabelle, as always, played referee through it all. She didn't say a word to me. So I said one to her. "You already wrote me out of your will," I said flatly. "Now I'm writing you out of my peace." Maris looked up from her phone. "You're being dramatic," she scoffed. I didn't lift my head. "You're just not used to me having lines. That's not the same as me not having them." Nobody replied. Zadie reached for my hand under the table, gave it a squeeze. This time, I squeezed back. I stopped being a participant in their story. I became the editor of mine. 2 days passed. We were home. I'd washed every piece of laundry that smelled faintly of their house, even the blanket Zadie clung to on the ride back. It wasn't about the scent. It was about what stayed in the fibers, what lingered between the threads. I folded it anyway, put it in the hall closet, closed the door. That morning, I opened my laptop to check my accounts. It was routine. I'd done it for years, more out of habit than worry. But this time, something felt off before I even clicked anything. The tab spun longer than usual, like the system itself was stalling. The number on the screen wasn't a typo. 12102s. I blinked. Refreshed. Looked again. Still there. My savings account, which had held over $92,000. Gone. Every last cent pulled out in small, consistent withdrawals. I scrolled through the activity log, my fingers stiff. All transfers labeled family reallocation or shared emergency use. Dates stretched back 3 months, and every single withdrawal was authorized through a linked device, Clarabelle's tablet. I called the bank. The rep, cheerful and efficient, confirmed my identity and walked me through the details. Yes, the device was on the profile. Yes, the routing number matched. And no, technically, there had been no breach. Just authorized family access from a shared history. "You're still the account holder," she said brightly, like that was consolation. But the account had already been gutted. I didn't cry. Not then. I closed the laptop and sat with my hands in my lap, staring at the wall across from me. It had been one thing to be forgotten, ignored, erased from cards and thank yous. It was another to be robbed by the very people who once said, "We're all in this together." Later that day, I messaged my cousin Dina. She and I had always exchanged New Year's cards. I asked if she was going to the family brunch Clarabelle usually hosted the Sunday after Christmas. "Didn't you see the invite?" she replied. I checked my inbox. Nothing. No calendar notification. No group text. I scrolled through the family thread. Gone. I had been removed from the conversation entirely. Not archived, not muted, removed. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I messaged Maris directly. "Looks like I'm out of the loop," she replied almost instantly. "Well, you said you were out, right?" No emoji, no punctuation, just cold precision. Not long after that, I got an alert on my phone from the backup bank account I had once set up for emergencies, back when Dad was recovering from his stroke, and Clarabelle claimed they needed a buffer just in case. I still had access, or so I thought. The alert said, "Changes made to shared access permissions." I logged in. My name was gone. In its place? Maris. Lazaro. That was the final confirmation. They hadn't just cut me out emotionally or symbolically. They had worked, strategically, silently, to push me out of every formal system that held us together. I sat at my desk in the living room. The sun had gone behind the trees, casting long blue shadows across the floor. Zadie was in her room, drawing, humming to herself. She didn't know anything had changed. That was the one thing I could still protect. I picked up the landline. Not the cell, not a text, not an email. I dialed the house number I still remembered without looking. Maris answered. Of course she did. "Hello?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. "You're good at wiping names," I said evenly. "But you're not good at erasing truth. That part always returns, with interest." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because that night, I did what they feared the most. I didn't threaten, I filed. 2 days after the call, I sat across from a woman named Deborah in a modest law office in downtown Savannah. Her desk was clean but lived in, with a jar of peppermint candies between us and 2 framed photos behind her. One of her dog, one of her daughter graduating law school. She didn't offer me coffee. I appreciated that. "I've seen a lot," she said, flipping through the folder I'd handed her. "But your documentation is one of the cleanest I've come across. Detailed, dated, and emotionally removed. That last part matters in court." I said nothing. She looked up over her glasses. "Do you want to try mediation first?" "No." "Okay," she said, tapping her pen once against the folder. "Let's file." She outlined the basics: civil fraud, misuse of jointly accessed accounts, and restitution. She didn't ask me to relive every detail. I think she could already see it in the paper trail, the pattern, the timing, the precision of betrayal. It took all of 15 minutes. After signing the final page, I leaned back in the chair and exhaled through my nose. It wasn't relief. Not yet. Just a shift. Deborah slid her copy into a manila envelope. "They're going to be surprised." I looked her in the eye. "I'm counting on it." 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived at my mother's doorstep. Signed for by Lazaro. Hand-delivered. Documented. According to the case log, Maris read it first. "Plaintiff, Akina Elling." Lazaro swore, loudly enough for the neighbor to hear. Clarabelle didn't raise her voice. She didn't even ask what it said. She walked into the dining room, picked up her phone, and began deleting every picture she had of me. Just like that. Like it was an app you uninstall. Not long after, I received a voicemail. From her. No apology, just, "Call me if you want to fix this." I didn't return it. Instead, I opened a different drawer. One I hadn't touched in months. It held every receipt I'd ever kept out of instinct. Hospital discharge forms, Walgreens pharmacy notes with my signature, notes scribbled during calls with insurance reps, emails Clarabelle forwarded to me with subject lines like, "Please help again," and "One last time, I promise." There were over 60 of them. I scanned them in batches, labeling each PDF. I highlighted totals, circled key phrases. This wasn't vengeance. This was verification. I used to think keeping proof made me petty, but I realized it made me prepared. They'd mistaken my quiet for consent. That was their mistake. Later that week, I uploaded everything into a secured cloud folder. My lawyer smiled when I told her I'd organized it by category. "I knew you were sharp," she said, "but you're making me look lazy." I told her it was easy to track people when they never expect you to. That weekend, the ripple effect began. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started texting me. Short messages, some cautious, some genuine. I didn't know. Are you okay? We always felt like something was off. I didn't respond to most of them. Not because I was bitter. I just wasn't building a support group. I was building a boundary. Then I saw Maris's Facebook post. White background, black cursive font. That vague emotional tone designed to stir sympathy without specifics. Family doesn't sue family. Some wounds never heal. But the betrayal still hurts. The comments were full of people validating her. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I bookmarked it. Because I wasn't finished yet. I hadn't even opened the last folder. The folder stayed on my desk until spring. I didn't rush to open it. It wasn't waiting to hurt me, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. We just sat with each other for a while, like two people who had already said all they needed to say. By June, it was over. The court awarded me a partial restitution, $68,000. Not everything I lost, but more than I expected. Enough to cover what mattered and let go of what didn't. The real victory wasn't the number. It was the silence that followed. A silence not built on fear or exclusion, but on completion. Nothing left to prove. Maris lost two of her biggest design clients within a month. One of them had seen the lawsuit filing online, public record. The other just felt like the timing wasn't right. Clarabelle had tried to smooth it over, called in a favor from a church friend who worked in PR. But a reputation built on image has nowhere to hide once the image cracks. Lazaro, it turns out, had been sloppy. A flagged audit exposed inconsistencies in one of his side businesses, which wasn't much more than invoice shuffling and tax loopholes. His credit lines froze. The next round of investment funding? Gone. None of this came from me. I didn't report anyone. I didn't leak anything. The truth, once pulled from silence, walks on its own. One afternoon in July, I checked the family group thread on instinct. Still gone, still blocked. Then I saw the email. From Clarabelle. Subject line. We didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't open it. You don't open the door again just because someone finally knocks. Zadie and I moved that same week. Nothing grand. A small duplex outside downtown Savannah. It had creaky floors and a front porch too shallow for real chairs. But the sunlight hit just right in the mornings, and the kitchen felt like it belonged to someone honest. We painted Zadie's room together, lemon yellow. She picked it, said it felt like the color of starting over. There's a new drawing on our fridge now. 3 stick figures. Me, Zadie. A small cat she insists will adopt this fall. Above it, in purple crayon, Mom plus me, home. We go to the farmer's market every Saturday. Sometimes we run into people from the old church. Sometimes they say things like, "We miss seeing you around," or "Hope your mom's doing okay." I smile, keep walking. Zadie never asks about the lawsuit, not directly. But one morning, while we were both eating cereal on the porch, she looked up and said, "You think we'll ever go back there?" I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No, baby, we're not meant to." She nodded like she already knew that. Later that day, I received a Zillow alert. Out of habit, I clicked. The old house was listed. For sale. The photos were bright and overly staged. Everything about it looked designed to forget. But the living room shot? The one that showed the wall where our family pictures used to hang? It was bare. The same space that once excluded me, now excluded everyone. That wall had been a declaration. Now it was drywall. I closed the listing. Didn't save it. Healing doesn't need reminders. Just room. Most nights now, I sit by the window while Zadie sleeps, and I watch the street stay quiet. Not lonely. Just quiet. It's taken me years to understand that freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits with you at the table you built yourself, in a house no one else claimed, and simply refuses to explain itself. They can say I was too cold, too distant, too much. But I know what I was. I was consistent. I was generous. And when I saw the damage, I didn't yell. I just stopped handing them the tools. You don't owe people the version of you that keeps their stories clean. You owe yourself a life that doesn't hurt just to stay in. I don't miss the seat they gave away. I'm building the table now.